Hi, Steve here from the Plymouth Historical Society, and today is Tuesday, March 27, 2018, and I'm down here along Route 11 in Plymouth Township at the entrance to the Avondale mine site. And we're right next to Route 11, so sorry about all the traffic noise, just bear with me on that one. The actual mine site is about 400 yards or midpoint between the two security gates. And we know the security gates are an inconvenience for people who like to drive their four-wheelers down here, but they're absolutely necessary. It's the only way to stop decades of illegal dumpers. Since the security gates have been installed, the mine site has been cleaned. And you can also see alongside of the security gate, between the gate and the pole, there's enough room for the quad riders to get through, and they're no problem whatsoever. They actually help keep an eye on the site here and keep the weeds down that grow on the trail riding their quads. I'm going to give a little tour of the mine site, and I'll just be stopping down there, so I'll be cutting in and out. Okay, next stop is down on the trail. Here we are on the trail going down to the Avondale mine site, and actually the site's right up ahead opposite of that yellow marker there. This trail used to be the former DL&W Bloomsburg branch railroad line that ran through here. The railroad is long gone, so what's left now is a dirt road or a trail. It's in relatively rough shape, I would say. Easy to walk, but difficult to drive a vehicle on. It's got a lot of dips that fill up with water when it rains, and humps that are sort of like a washboard. In the meanwhile, before it becomes the Susquehanna Warrior Trail, it would be great if we could get the donation of maybe some material that wouldn't get muddy, like the millings from roads or stuff like that that people would consider scrap, but would be a big help to us here to at least fill in some of the big depressions and sort of smooth out the washboard here to make it a little bit easier for the people that ride their bikes here or people that hike. And we do give tours down here, group tours and individual tours of the mine site, so it would be a lot easier on our vehicles too coming down here. Okay, our next stop will be the mine site itself. And here we are at the entrance to the Avondale mine site memorial garden. The first thing you see on the right hand side is a kiosk, and that is a kiosk that we just installed last year. And on the bottom it reads DL&W Railroad Avondale Mines, which was the same big lettered sign that was painted on the coal breaker that was here, because this was actually a stop for the DL&W Railroad for passengers to get off here at Avondale Mines. Looking straight ahead, up where the flag is there, the gray wall and the big stone block wall is where the coal breaker building was. And it went from the top of that wall right over and down to near where we are here today. Where we're standing is a spot right between the coal breaker and another building. Let me just pan over a little bit here. And I'll add these pictures there. Yeah, sorry about the wind noise here. It really didn't seem that loud when I was on site, but boy, it sure seems loud now. I was talking about the washery building, which was a building located right alongside of the Avondale coal breaker, and it was a final processing building where coal was washed and loaded into hopper cars below. It's the remains of the powerhouse, and the powerhouse was a steam boiler plant, very large steam boiler plant actually, and the purpose of this was to make steam that was used to power the machinery down in the mines and in the breaker. Now, if I don't get you dizzy just panning all the way over to the left, hopefully I can do this. Okay, right there you'll see near us are two short concrete structures, and those were concrete footers or foundations for an overhead trestle that was here, and it went from the breaker and the washery in between the two buildings over across the railroad tracks, overhead of the railroad tracks, to the column bank that was directly behind us. And that was a place where they would take column, waste rock and slate that was picked out of the good coal that was mined, and put it on little carts and take it across the overhead trestle and dump it over at the column bank. Also, you can see a couple of railroad ties that I found here. There's quite a bit of them actually laying around. And I'd like to construct a little project of getting a couple of mainline rails, a couple short pieces, maybe 5-6 feet long, and set them up on a few more tracks there just to give a demonstration of the railroad tracks that used to be here. Because this whole area was covered in railroad tracks called sidings. They were used for storage of empty coal cars and also for full coal cars that were filled up and were parked here waiting their turn to be shipped on the mainline railroad. The other concrete structures that are over there, I'm going to take a walk over there and explain a little bit about them. The two walls that are right in front of us here were part of the original Avondale coal breaker that stood in this spot. There was a railroad track that went between those two walls, and it was an area used for loading coal that came up the shaft through the breaker and was loaded into railroad cars here. When the breaker was dismantled in 1935, this area was still used to load coal, but this time raw mine coal came up through the shaft, which is right to the left of that big stone wall up there, above the no trespassing sign. Raw mine coal came up through the shaft onto a conveyor belt and was dumped into railroad cars right down here in this spot. Also, you could see there's a wall behind these two that has some notches in it. Those notches were used to support big wooden beams as floor joists inside of the coal breaker. The edge of the coal breaker was right where those two wooden sticks are. So the breaker went from there up above and all the way over the top of that stone wall and down to the ground where we are here. Next stop will be up at the upper kiosk and the tunnel. Before we take a look at the kiosk and the tunnel here in the Avondale Memorial Garden, I'd like to give some recognition to a very, very special person. His name was Joe Keating. Joe was an avid historian and did extensive studies into the 1869 Avondale mine disaster, which happened right here on this property in September of 1869, and resulted in the single highest number of loss of life in an anthracite mine disaster in American history. He also helped to spearhead and to guide the volunteer groups that created this beautiful memorial garden. The Plymouth Historical Society received a donation of 4.3 acres of the Avondale mine site for historic preservation from the Earth Conservancy Group in 2013. And when we received this property, we also inherited this memorial garden and everything that is here. If it were not for the volunteer groups, the Anthracite Living History Group, and all of their hard work, their expense, their sweat equity, you wouldn't have what we see here today. We continue to maintain the memorial garden and to add on to different features as we can. Now I'm going to swing over to the flower boxes, the tunnel there, and the original kiosk that was here. We use this kiosk to put up some rules, regulations, things like that. As I said, the Historical Society does own this property, so it is private property, but it is open for public recreation. And by public recreation, we encourage people to come here to visit, to check out the mine site, to learn about it, to study about it. And while they're here, they can take a break when they're hiking or biking down the Susquehanna Warrior Trail. In the kiosk, you'll see on the bottom side, we have some pamphlets. Please take one when you're here. Also, we have a visitor sign-up sheet. The sign-up sheet helps us keep sort of a little bit of a track of how many people come through here. So far we have about 250 names on the list, and that's great. It's really what we want. This historic mine disaster site is right here. Route 11's right up on top of this wall. You can still hear the cars going by. Most people don't even know it's here, that it exists. And we really do encourage people to come down and hike the trail, bike the trail, and while you're doing that, stop and check out the Avondale. The next thing I'll show you is the tunnel. This is a back gate that was installed over an opening in the tunnel in 2012. The back gate serves a couple real good purposes. It allows our bats that live in there to go in and out, and it gives people a really great opportunity to peek into the darkness of the tunnel and to feel that 52-degree air that comes pouring out of there in the summertime. It's a great natural air conditioning cool-off spot when it's about 90 degrees. The tunnel predates the Avondale mine and was an early attempt to strike coal on this property. People knew there was coal in the mountainside above here because Abijah Smith was mining it in 1806. So they figured if they came down here and dug a tunnel straight into the mountain, they would hit coal too. Well, that didn't happen, and after digging through nothing but rock, the tunnel was abandoned. But the tunnel played a very important part in the history of the Avondale mine disaster, because when the Avondale mine shaft was sunk directly to the left of here, it intersected part of this old tunnel. And it was this old tunnel that the bodies that were recovered of the miners who perished in the Avondale mine disaster were brought out of. The actual opening of the tunnel was not this one that we see here today, because throughout the years the land had been changed, and where we're standing right now, which is pretty much level, was just a sloping hillside that came down. The original opening of the tunnel was directly behind us. You could see in the old sketches in the short wall that's directly behind us. But that portion of the tunnel was removed when they dug this flat area that we see here today, which was part of the coal breaker. Our next stop will be up taking a look at the Avondale mine shaft. The large wooden timbers that you see on the ground in front of us with bolts sticking up out of them were once part of a hoist head frame that was installed above the mine shaft, which was on the other side of that little stone wall. The hoist was used to raise and lower miners in and out of the mine, and also to take down equipment and bring coal up out of the mine. The shaft itself is filled right up to the top with dirt and rock and fill, so there's really not a lot to see up there. Also, when you're here at Avondale, you'll notice some signs like private property, no trespassing, and some warning signs. These signs are put in areas that are really dangerous for people to walk on. As I said, it is private property, and it is open to the public for public recreation with restrictions. And those restrictions are here for your safety. There's a lot of trip hazards. This area is very natural. There's a lot of vines, trip hazards, and things where you can get hurt on. And we do post those areas for your own safety. And when you're here, please, whatever you do, don't be tempted to go up on top of either one of these walls, the big high old stone wall or even the gray wall that you see there. Both walls are high, and it would be super easy to trip on a vine or something there and to fall off and to get seriously hurt. Our next stop will be one of the few intact remaining buildings here, the Lamp House. And the best way to get there is on a sort of a trail. You can't really see it much now because of the leaves, but a little bit of a trail that goes across to that lower wall there. Once you get to that wall, it's level and it's a very easy walk to the Lamp House. And once again, don't get too close to the edge of the wall. It's probably about 10 feet high, and you really don't want to fall off of that. So our next stop will be the Lamp House. Here we are at the Lamp House at the Avondale mine site. When the colliery was in operation, the lower level of this building was used as a place where they stored, maintained, repaired, and issued miners' cap lamps and their flame safety lamps. As you can imagine, going down in a pitch black mine and working there all day, in dangerous conditions, it was very, very important to have a lamp that would function properly and that would work throughout your whole shift. This job was left up to lampmen. The upper floor of this building was once used as an office. And you see that it's, when they raised these buildings, or partially raised them in the 60s, they collapsed the upper floor. And although the upper floor is pretty much collapsed right down on top of itself, the lower level is quite safe. The concrete here is very thick, the ceiling is in good shape, and I would say it's pretty safe to be in there. This building is very popular among the paranormal groups. Personally, I've never experienced anything here paranormal, but other people have different results. One thing really I'd like to mention is, if you decide to visit this area or do any type of paranormal research, especially if it takes you into the nighttime, be extremely careful of how you walk here, because there are quite a bit of little hazards here that you merely walk around in the daytime, like rocks on the ground and pieces of concrete and sticks. But at nighttime they could be a serious trip hazard there. There are two other buildings down here. Let me just do a quick pan around. Oh, one more thing. Those steps that go up there, they do go up to another set of steps that goes up a wall to Route 11. But in the summertime, they are completely tangled up and overgrown with vines and thorns and whatnot, that whole area up there. So even though it's a shortcut from Route 11, there's no handrail on the steps up there, and it's really not a good idea to come down that way to get to here. The best way to get to here is up along the trail by the shaft where we just walked. The other two buildings are completely obscured down there in the woods. And the first building was a wash house. The second building down, which you can see from the trail, you can see both of them from the trail actually, was a ventilation fan house. Both of these buildings have been completely stripped of any type of equipment or anything else that was inside of them. They're all empty. And right now there's really no good way to get down to these buildings or much to see inside of them anyhow. Maybe someday we'll clear a better path or another entrance from the trail up. There's a bit of a hill in the way to get to them. So for right now, it's best just to stick to the open areas and even the lamp house here. Our last shot will be sort of an overview of the Avondale Colliery, and we'll finish up from there. Our last stop is on the hillside above the Memorial Garden, facing down towards the trail. I hope you've enjoyed my little tour of the Plymouth Historical Society's Avondale Mine Site here in Plymouth Township, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. If you have any questions whatsoever concerning the mine site, the mine, or the mine disaster, please leave them in the comments below, or you can contact us anytime at the Plymouth Historical Society at our webpage or on Facebook, and we will do our very best to answer any and all questions. Also, if you would like to volunteer a little bit of your time in the warm weather to help maintain this property by cutting grass, picking up sticks, planting flowers, things of that nature, we would seriously appreciate your help. And don't forget, the next time you're hiking on the DL&W Trail, to stop here and visit the Avondale mine site. Thank you very much. Some still images. The Avondale breaker that was destroyed by the fire. Avondale disaster victims being brought out of the old tunnel. The second Avondale breaker as seen in 1880. Breaker during renovations. You can see the breaker boys sitting up there. That's what it looked like in 1905 after being renovated. The notches in the wall on the west edge of the breaker that I was talking about. The washery, breaker, and overhead trestle, 1910. Our kiosk is alongside the trestle footers. And finally, the DL&W Railroad facing Plymouth, 1918.